Dear colleagues, respected friends of the Institute, I'm glad that we gather today to discuss a topic that is important for the development of infrastructure in social sciences, but also about the contribution of the PERFORM project, which was implemented for 4 years by the Swiss agency HELVETAS, which strengthened that infrastructure and which in the middle of the last decades brought new ideas and presented possible trends in our social sciences. I am glad that Mr. Martin Ditz and Mr. Pelarevic, who developed the PERFORM project in Serbia, are with us today. And especially I'm glad that with us is director of the Science Fund, Mrs. Jovicic, the representative of the government, Mr. Grozic, and other colleagues for whom these ideas reminded a solid basis for the development of social sciences. But I am especially glad that the director that with us is colleague George Lutz, who has extensive experience in the development of scientific infrastructure, and finally colleagues Bernd Steinmann, who made a great study on Serbian joint to European Social Survey, which was, I think, the most important initiative of PERFORM project. Before I hand over the floor to Mr. Pelarevic and ask him to moderate today's conversation, allow me to say a few words about the Institute of Social Sciences. Today is a special day for Institute because we are celebrating 65 years since the establishment of the Institute. And on these occasions, these days, we are organizing a conference where we'll discuss with colleagues from the region about the changes in values that have occurred in the last 3 decades. The opening is today at 5 o'clock in the building of the Academy of Science, and I invite you to join us on this occasion. This anniversary coincided with the accreditation of the Institute as a scientific institution of the national importance for the Republic of Serbia, and we are very proud of that, and we will try to improve our capacities with the help of our friends for the World Bank. I think and I hope that Mr. Nedovic is with us now, and other international organizations in order to get closer to European scientific area. I mentioned that about the process through which the first research was organized within the ESS ERIC network. Mr. Steinmann wrote a great study in which he described the efforts and success factors very well, but more importantly, he managed to capture the gaps and lessons learned from our process advocacy. And the existence of this evidence will allow us to have discussions and decide on ways forward. I hope that you get a chance to see the document before the event. And soon we will hear Dr. Steinmann's presentations about his findings, which will allow us to have a fruitful discussions about potential next steps and further collaborations. Investing in the research and infrastructure in the field of the social science was key to the development of the Institute of Social Science. By investigating in ESS, we are actually building a national research infrastructure. The work around the ESS, the collection of data that is publicly available, will remain for years to come for further generation of social science researchers. The result of the process that Mr. Steinman will talk about to successfully completed rounds of researchers, the preparations of the third full membership of Serbia in the ESS ERIC infrastructure, and the clear determination of the decisions of the Ministry of Science and the government to support this intention. We see all this as a mission accomplished, but we would like to continue and see options for how Serbia can join other research infrastructure, such as SHARE, Survey of Health, Aging and Retirement, or gender and generation research. And I am really hope that together with the ministry, the Science Fund and other partners, we will continue to work on the development of this idea. And now I ask Mr. Celajic to take the floor and to moderate the further discussion.
I guess I can do it from here. Good afternoon. My name is Nenad Celajic. I work for HELVETAS. I used to work on the project Perform together with Martin Ditz. So there is, how to say, this good notion that you start with a joke, but this actually happened this morning when I was leaving from home. My wife asked me, why you don't bring your laptop? You have a round table, will you do a presentation? And I said, no, I go to the Institute of Social Sciences. You can do presentation there only if you have a PhD. But I can still, I mean, this is good, and I'm happy that I'm given this opportunity to moderate the session today. Before we started, I just want to express the gratitude on behalf of HELVETAS, but also personal, that I was, we were part of this. We could work on Perform project, which actually came after RRTP. George and I, we just discussed also about the RRTP and some work which was done around that project. So there was quite a strong investment on the side of SDC in the region and in Serbia, and we are here talk about some of the results which emerged from that project. Before taking too much time, I was informed by the organizers that unfortunately Mr. Alexander Jovic from the Ministry of Science will not be able to join today. As he's sending his greetings and congratulations to the institute, as I was said. But the fact that actually yesterday the new government was elected, I think that they are still having some discussion. Thank you all for joining. Before inviting Bernd to present the study which he did and have his presentation, I also want to use opportunity to thank him for taking the time and coming to Serbia and to Belgrade, discussing with the colleagues who were involved around Perform project and conducting a very nice story of change. The conference around which Institute is celebrating 65th birthday is called Changes or Change, and we are here also today to discuss about one important change which took place. So Bernd, I'm sure that the weather in Switzerland is not that good as it's here in Belgrade. So you tell us a bit more and then start your presentation. Welcome, Bernd.
Thank you, Nenad. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great, excellent. So thanks a lot for the kind invitation. I'm not going to start with a weather forecast, but I can just tell you the weather is splendid. It's sunny and actually too warm for the time of the year. Let me just share my screen because I have a presentation which I would like to share with you. I hope you can see this. Okay. Can everybody see the screen? I can see it now. Right, excellent. So thanks a lot, first of all, to all of you. It's my pleasure to be with you today, even though only virtually and not in person. It was a huge privilege to do this small piece of research on a really interesting example of successful advocacy in Serbia. So many thanks to the Institute of Social Sciences for actually having this event today, having this roundtable, and especially also to everybody who was ready to meet with me to respond to my many questions about this interesting process back in September, mainly in Belgrade. The objective of this small, really small study was to, first of all, reconstruct the whole process of Serbia's accession to the European Social Survey, but then also to identify relevant factors for success. So what were the key factors that made this whole engagement a success and led to the fact that Serbia is today a full member of the ESS, and also to identify various outcomes of the fact that Serbia is now a member. What are the outcomes, the direct, indirect outcomes we can see from this engagement? And finally, also to talk a little bit about the remaining challenges there are, and there certainly are a couple of challenges, and we will have the opportunity to talk about this today. Before I start, and since we are all among researchers today, allow me a very brief note on methodology. So the evidence for this small report was collected through desk research of project documents, of websites, but mainly through semi-structured individual focus group interviews in Belgrade and online, starting in late August up to mid-September. I talked to a broad range of stakeholders, many of whom are here with us today, from the social sciences, from the Perform project, from different state representatives, from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, from ESS ERIC, and some more. So that's like the source of information I could rely on. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on the first aspect and the first part of this report, which is a summary of the whole process, because many of you, I assume, will know this process much better than I do. Just let me briefly recap what has happened since early 2017 so that we are all on the same page. You know that already before 2017, various social scientists from Serbia repeatedly tried to lobby the government to become a member of the European Social Survey, but they repeatedly failed to convince state representatives and to join the ESS. And this is why in early 2017, a group of social scientists around Dragan Stanojevic from the University of Belgrade, they reached out to the Perform project to see whether and how the project could possibly support the advocacy efforts of the social scientists and to help them approach the government and eventually convince the government of their demand. By that time, Perform already had some institutional standing, a lot of experience in facilitating an exchange between the sciences and between state representatives. They tried to foster evidence-based policymaking in Serbia. So they already had an established level of trust and a good access to relevant state actors. So the project was kind of an obvious ally for those social scientists to seek help. And Perform agreed to look into the issue and to start discussions. And still in the course of early 2017, the project helped to establish ESS advocacy working group, helped them to develop a joint advocacy strategy, to agree on joint messages towards state representatives, and to get clarity on the perceived benefits in order to strengthen their advocacy messages they would convey to the government. A first highlight was then obviously the conference organized in July 2017 in Belgrade with around 100 researchers and other interested stakeholders with a stake in the ESS, which was a key moment because after that conference, the Serbian government would submit an official membership application to the European Social Survey. And the guest membership, a guest status to the ESS was then granted by ESS ERIC still in October 2017. And this somehow paved the way for Serbia to participate for the first time in round 9 of the European Social Survey, which took place in 2018-2019. This was also made possible because the ministry and the Perform project could agree on a co-funding. The advocacy group, the social scientists, made sure that the whole process is going smoothly, that the data are collected in time, that enumerators get trained. At the same time, they also facilitated a kind of joint learning process, an ongoing dialogue among the involved stakeholders throughout that round 9 of the ESS. 2 years later, this was followed with a second participation with a guest status in ESS round 10, which happened from 2020 to 2022. Now, this participation was fully funded by the Serbian government because Perform project ceased to exist in the meantime. And finally, as you all know, in April this year, ESS ERIC then officially accepted Serbia as its 27th member with full voting rights in the European Social Survey. And the story from here onwards is going to continue, hopefully, and we're going to talk about this later today. So that's just to briefly recap what has happened, what were key steps from early 2017 up to present. So why did the process go so well and relatively smoothly? If you come from Switzerland, you always expect that policy processes take ages, at least 10 to 20 years, because there are so many checks and balances and people you need to consult with. So seeing this happen within 3 years is quite, at least from our point of view, a real success story. So what were the key factors that led to this success? For this, I'd like to look at 3 distinctive actors and their role. And you will find much more details in the report, which I think was already distributed to you. I'd like to have a brief look at the role of the Perform project, at the group of social scientists, and at the European partners, and how they contributed to this whole process. At the same time, we must not forget the important role of the Ministry of Education and Sciences, who was in the focus of all these groups, was kind of the target of all these groups, but also actively engaged with all of them and was ready to engage, ready to listen and discuss. So the ministry itself also played a very important role. Now, coming to Perform, the role of the project was obviously the one of a so-called knowledge broker. First of all, and thanks to the mutual trust and already established before with the project's work by facilitating dialogue between sciences and policymakers, the project had already established a good level of trust. It had a solid institutional standing towards the government. So it was in a very good position to open doors for social scientists to get in touch with the government and to start a discussion, start a dialogue. So they could invite people for roundtables, they could get people in contact with each other. So the project did that very well. And by doing so, they mobilized key system actors, not just from the government and the social sciences, but they also tried to bring in other relevant system actors among the European partners like ESS, like FORCE from Switzerland. And that was actually beneficial for both sides because many respondents would tell me, by meeting those people, we just learned about the other side. So it was not just about the social scientists getting access to the government, but also the government, the European partners, having a better understanding of the social scientists and their demands and what they actually need. So it was both ways. The second key role of the project was certainly that it could help the group of social scientists to improve their advocacy strategy, their approach, how they advocate, how they lobby government and other key actors. The project helped the group to straighten up their advocacy strategy, get the narrative right, have a clear theory of change, a clear action plan, what we do first, what we do next, a clear logical sequence of things. And maybe most importantly, they helped the social scientists to adjust their plan and their activities to official planning cycles and budgeting processes. Because governments, ministries, they have their own logic, which is sometimes hard to understand. So the social scientists, thanks to Perform, could also understand what is the logic of the government, how do they do the planning, what is their planning, their budgeting cycle, how can we align our activities to these planning cycles. And that is also something which was clearly appreciated from the government side itself. Finally, and not least important, was the co-funding. Perform at some point in time agreed with the Ministry of Education to co-fund the first participation of Serbia in the ESS. Perform provided a €100,000 grant covering the cost of data collection and capacity building for enumerators. And that was certainly a breakthrough. The agreement on the co-funding of Round 9 paved the way for anything that happened after. On the other hand, there was the group of social scientists who organized, with the help of Perform, organized themselves in that so-called ESS advocacy working group. They were not only highly committed, but also kind of the legitimate owners of the demands that Serbia will join the European Social Survey. So they were the ones owning the problem. They were the legitimate actors to talk about this, to raise demands and requests towards the government. And there was certainly an exceptional engagement of this group of young postgraduates with a clear vision of the future. They had a clear idea where they would like to see the social sciences in Serbia in the future, and what would the benefits be if they could join the ESS and participate as scientists in this survey. There was a clear enthusiasm from their side. They wanted to make change happen, and that resulted in a very powerful kind of bottom-up campaign. And according to what I understood from government representatives, that came as a kind of a positive surprise, that there was a bottom-up campaign, that people from below, so to say, were actively advocating on their issue of concern, tried to convince the government. And that was something which was positively acknowledged, appreciated within the ministry. Equally important was that those social scientists were ready to deliver. They would not just talk about Serbia to join the survey, and they did not just like come up with demands and requests to the government, but when the time was there, they were ready to deliver. And Serbia joined Round 9 of the ESS. They made sure that the data is collected within time, that more than 100 enumerators get trained in time. And they sometimes also came up with really creative solutions to come across technical problems, like the availability of tablets for data collection, getting the right software for these tablets. There were lots of stumbling blocks, and the scientists successfully managed to find solutions for all of this. So they were ready to walk the talk, which was absolutely important to convince decision makers to continue with that engagement. Another interesting aspect is how this group managed to build networks and to broaden its supporter base. I think the scientists were very successful in building networks on an individual basis. So they reached out to their colleagues from different scientific institutes across Serbia to secure their support, to bring them on board. And there were many people from different academic institutions ready to join that engagement and to support the advocacy group. And this was maybe at that time, it was critical, because if they would have gone through institutional procedures, this would have seriously slowed down the whole process, and we might not be where we are today. So going through personal networks, using these personal connections and linkages was absolutely essential. Today, it could be a weakness for the future, and we are going to discuss this a little bit later. It was equally important to have representatives of various research institutions, academic institutions in Serbia, just to demonstrate that the benefits of the ESS would not just be for a small, tiny elite group of scientists, but for the whole of social sciences in Serbia. And I think that was a very important message towards state authorities. Finally, also the European partners played an important role. And Perform made a great effort to bring in those European partners from the ESS ERIC, from the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission. They paid repeated visits to Serbia to explain what the European Social Survey is, how a country can participate, what the different requirements are, and try to explain the manifold benefits. And they kind of try to present it, as I understood, as an easy win to the Serbian government. Because at comparatively low costs, if you compare it to other research collaborations like CERN, for instance, which is very expensive, at comparatively low costs, the Serbian government could send a positive signal towards Brussels by joining the ESS. They could strengthen the Serbian research community and help to build their networks and position it in the European scientific landscape. And it could also contribute to improving public policy making by getting better sociological data, which could be used for policy making. So a relatively easy win at low cost. At the same time, they also used the stick, so not just the carrot, but also the stick by presenting ESS membership as a key stepping stone for Serbia's European integration process. And they also made it clear that the ESS ERIC somehow considered Serbia's ability to meet with the very high standards of the European Social Survey in terms of data collection, data processing, data analysis, and publication, that they considered this as a kind of a test. So if Serbia would be able to meet with the very high ESS standards, that would send a very positive signal towards Brussels and other European partners that they are ready and able to meet these high standards. So the European partners kind of played the strategy of carrot and stick at the same time, and that also proved to be very important for the whole process. So now we know that all of this was successful and eventually resulted in Serbia joining the ESS and being accepted as a full member this year. So what has changed? Was it worthwhile after all to make this whole effort, to pay the money and to join the ESS? Obviously, yes, what we can say for the time being. It's clear that more research would be needed to go in depth and to explore this in more detail. But what we can see from now is that first, joining the ESS certainly opened new entry points for sociologists across Serbia. They have loads of high quality data available, and they have not only access to that data from Serbia, which they collect themselves, but they also have access to comparative data from all over Europe, which opens a whole new field for sociological research, offers opportunities for collaboration, and also resulted already now in many new publications, including PhD, master studies, and so on. Equally important is that researchers and institutions who were involved in those 2 rounds of ESS now have the know-how to carry out large-scale surveys like the ESS, to meet with very high quality standards and to process huge amounts of data within a given time. And I think someone in an interview told me that Serbia even outpaced Norway in round 9 or 10 of the ESS, that the data was available and processed even before the Norwegians could do. And I think that's a really good sign and an interesting detail. So there was a lot of know-how, capacity, skills, knowledge built up over round 9 and 10 of the ESS. Also important is that many young researchers got trained in order to collect the data during those 2 research rounds. So more than around 100 young researchers got trained as field enumerators. And that's obviously a very important investment into for the discipline's future, that you have people trained, they gather experience in collecting data, and they are part of such a huge research cooperation. I already mentioned networking and collaboration. And something also quantitative and obvious outcome is that some involved institutions, they manage to, or they observe that their acquisition of new research projects today is more successful than it used to be in the past. And to some extent, that can certainly be kind of related to the fact that Serbia is now a member of the ESS. So there are new impact studies for infrastructure projects, Horizon 22 projects, which Serbian research institutions can carry out and contribute to. Besides that, and maybe more soft outcomes is, it also seems that the social sciences and state representatives during the process, they managed to build up a certain level of trust and mutual understanding. So going through the whole process, meeting over and over again, discussing all these different issues, and then actually participating in the ESS certainly helped that the different sides started to better understand each other. So not just state actors better know the social scientists, but also the other way around. I mentioned in the beginning that social scientists learned about the planning and the budgeting cycles of government. So the learning was obviously mutual and in both directions. At the same time, social scientists also learned to better convey their key messages to policymakers, to the broad public, to other non-experts, including the media. So to break down complex messages and try to explain what they're doing and why this is important for the Serbian government, for the country as a whole, for the broad public. Whether or not this had an influence or an impact on policymaking in the sense of evidence-based policymaking, that is really difficult to say. And obviously more research would be needed to verify whether that hypothesis holds true. Some respondents said that at the lower level of administration, there is a very active uptake of scientific evidence for policymaking. But everybody, I think, agreed that at higher level of policymaking, scientific evidence did not really play a very important role so far. It is also important to say that evidence-based policymaking and improving policymaking through scientific evidence was never the government's main motivation for joining the ESS. That was pretty clear from the very beginning. So Serbia's full membership in the ESS ERIC is a huge success. I think everybody agrees on that. It's a huge success for the social sciences, but also for the Serbian government, for the Ministry of Education, and kind of a posthumous gratification also for the PERFORM project, which stopped to exist in late 2017-18 already. However, to secure this success, and with this we're coming to an end, to secure this success in the long run and to reap benefits also in future, the government, social sciences, but also the international community, they need to stay alert and continue to engage in various dimensions. So before I end, allow me to highlight 3 things which I think are crucial to keep in mind and to consider for the future. First of all, and I've mentioned that before, I think it's crucial that the institutional ownership for the ESS in Serbia gets broadened and gets strengthened in a sense that it becomes institutionalized. I've mentioned before that the social scientists who engaged for the ESS were mainly based on personal connections, personal acquaintances, but the institutions as such, they were not formally standing behind the ESS. So there is no proper institutional setup owning the ESS in Serbia. So to maintain success in the long run, I think establishing a solid institutional basis is absolutely crucial. At the same time, also broadening the base of those who can profit, who can benefit from the ESS, in order to signal to a broad public, to the government, that again, it's not a small elite profiting from all of this, but it's the whole of social sciences in the country. Second, and closely related to that, is that you need to keep lobbying for ESS membership. Participation in ESS rounds are not cast in stone. There have been many countries who participated once, twice, 3 times, and then stopped for a couple of years. Some of them rejoined, others not. So I think everybody needs to keep demonstrating that there are measurable benefits, improvements in terms of teaching, in terms of research. So you need to keep demonstrating the obvious benefits for the Serbian society, for the research community, and for the country as a whole. That requires constant lobbying, advocacy, and public communication around the ESS. So don't take it for granted. And I think that's not only a role there for the state and for the social sciences, but also for the international community, for donors like the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, or for HELVETAS and other INGOs, to kind of reassume that role of a knowledge broker, as we have seen from Perform, which did it very, very well, to again occupy that role of a knowledge broker and try to facilitate between social sciences, maybe also other research fields, politics, and the broad public. I think there's an important role to play there. The international community did that very well a couple of years back, but then pulled out a little bit. And I think it's time to reflect whether or not it would be worthwhile to invest again. And with this, I'm sure that the ESS will remain a success story well into the future. And I'd like to thank you for your attention, for your patience with me, and I'm looking forward to your feedback and the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernd, for a great work and very good presentation. I have here the list of speakers, so for me it's easiest to go with the list. I would suggest if you have a certain comments or questions to Bernd, that we collect you, and then maybe toward the end of the session, Bernd can respond to some. It's not always the case that someone is doing the research piece or the study, as Bernd did this one, and that have the opportunity that the first one who is commenting is actually the director of FORCE from Switzerland. Bernd, you mentioned the international networking, which was part of the whole ESS, and part of this networking is actually the collaboration which between the institute and other actors was established with FORCE and Professor Lutz and Professor Farago, who is with us online. You were here 4 years before, so when one of these conferences which was mentioned was actually taking place. So I would like to give you a floor, and thank you very much for coming and joining us in person.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me here. I remember about 4 years ago that there was a lot of uncertainty. Are we going to get this funded? Are we going to succeed? And it was extremely nice to see, I think it was in Den Haag this year, when during the ESS General Assembly, Serbia was officially welcomed as a member. And being myself involved in infrastructures in many capacities, I know how hard this is. You know, Switzerland, just to give you a little anecdote, is not yet a member of ESS. We only have observer status and didn't manage to convince our government to create conditions to become a full member. And we're working on that, but we're not there yet, but hopefully in the next years. I also really enjoyed kind of reading the report, because actually this is kind of a really nice case study also to see how hard this is and what it takes to get a project like that on the funded and the different steps and the processes, which isn't just a formal. I think it was very nicely outlined how much this is a kind of a people's business, and to some cases it shows also how difficult it is to some extent for social science and humanities projects to get this kind of funding. I think we are in a way in a competition, and we are often in a competition with natural science, and somehow the willingness of governments to fund natural big infrastructures in natural science tends to be bigger. Another process which I think was kind of interesting to see as well is that it took a while really to convince the government to get this funded. And it showcases, and there's still some instability, and it showcases that research infrastructures of this type, they need different funding mechanisms. So you need to think in a different logic than the usual project funding that you have in a lot of countries. So funding agencies, they usually shy away from that because they're worried once they start to get funded, they will never get out of it. And that's of course something that worries because it creates costs. But also you need to steer these kind of research infrastructures differently than you do individual projects. You need to have some kind of scientific oversight mechanisms in place. You also need to have different kind of funding mechanisms in place, so you can't just give kind of competitive project funding, but you need to do this differently. What I really thought interesting about the report is that it showcases kind of the importance of mobilization. So it needs really the whole community to stand behind kind of a project like that. And then you see governments or funding agencies willing to act and willing to get engaged. And that is not different in Serbia than in other countries. I know, I mean, you were mentioning other projects like the Gender and Generation Program, like SHARE. You know, if you want kind of a country to participate, and we are in this process in Switzerland now for GGP, it requires really the support of the whole community, and you have to showcase it to the funders that it's really important. It's not enough just one individual kind of coming and saying, yes, you know, we should do that. You know, that is not good enough. And it is a big effort, and we managed to succeed with this around ESS. Which brings me, and I think this was showcased a bit also nicely in the report, you know, there is a lot of value beyond the actual ESS participation. I think, you know, to get an understanding, and research infrastructures are really the forum where this happens, you know, to get a mutual understanding about research cooperation between funders and government researchers. That is rare, you know, because these worlds are usually quite separated and quite isolated, but in the discussions on research infrastructures, these worlds come together, and it's sometimes hard, you know. I mean, for governments to understand what on earth these researchers want and why it's important for them, so researchers have to make a case and say and argue why there is a value for this beyond just the pure simple research projects. But also the other way around. I think, you know, for researchers to understand, yes, of course, governments operate under political logics. They operate under financial logics, and you have to be able to speak to that and make your case, and that's how you succeed. And so you did in Serbia. But I think, and Bernd kind of tapped into this, I think these projects, these large European projects, they have also some other impact. So one of them is, for example, they have been one of the first advocates of open science and open research data. So typically on these projects, there's no embargo, so nobody gets preferential access to data. And I believe, and a lot of funders are going into this direction, governments as well, I think this is the way to go. You know, we are creating not just a private kind of good. When we create data like that and produce data, we are creating kind of a public academic good or scientific good that should be available to everybody. And these big projects, they have been at the forefront of this, and this has spillover effects then also to other kind of projects and countries that then implement this. Maybe to just one other mechanisms where I think, you know, ESS is a showcase or a good basis to go beyond, because what we see now in Europe, but also in a lot of countries, is what I would call clustering, where there's a requirement not just to have individual projects going forward, but the whole kind of range of kind of important data collections in social science and humanities, but also in other disciplines, they have to show how they kind of hang together and how they kind of form a package, and how they also manage to create synergies and how they become useful for the whole social science and even beyond that also for humanities. And I think this is a process we see a lot of in countries, and I think this is also something that could prove to be successful in Serbia, is that, you know, if you come together and showcase to the governments and to the funders that, you know, their needs and their different needs and different projects and different data collections that should be funded, you have gonna have a much stronger case than when each kind of the projects go into this individually. And this requires, of course, a lot of coordination. So researchers, research institutions from different universities, they need to come together, kind of deliberate, argue, define priorities, because you can't get everything funded. That is impossible. So you need to kind of create priorities, and then you have a package that you can go to your funding agency or the government and say, you know, this is important, and you're going to be in competition to some extent with other scientific domains, but that's just the nature of how these funding mechanisms work. But I believe it's worth doing so for two reasons. A, because I'm a strong believer that societal and political problems are among the major problems we have. If you look, you know, at just simple example about climate change, it's great to know. It's not great to know. It's actually sad to know that, you know, there's global warming. But it's so. But what do we do with this knowledge? We don't seem to manage to kind of transform societies in a way to address, or politics in a way to address these kind of global challenges. What you see, what's going on politically in a lot of countries, you know, we thought at some point in time that we are now in a phase of nice liberal democracy spreading everywhere, but that's not what we see. We see a lot of tension within countries, but also, as we've recently seen, also between countries, and that's something we haven't imagined. And to understand these processes, we really need good data, and we also need to be able to do research on that. So social science and to some extent humanities have really an important contribution to make. And maybe just on the last thing, why I also think it's worth getting invested in research infrastructure. Research infrastructures are about collaboration. You know, it's not about kind of competition in science. That also, of course, is also important and it happens, but in research infrastructures, this is where people come together, they collaborate, and they try to create something together. They create kind of data collections across countries over time. And this typically means also you meet a lot of nice people there, because you meet the people that have this collaborative kind of mindset and are willing to kind of create infrastructures and projects together. And that's also just fun. And so that's why I think is another good reason to get involved in these endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, George, very much. I would now like to invite Mr. Richard Kohli from the Swiss Development Cooperation Office here in Belgrade, who was also one, if I can say, one of the founding fathers of Perform project. Yes, I am, of course, aware. So it's now very good to have you here in Belgrade. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Richard Kohli, currently head of cooperation in the Swiss Embassy, not just representing SDC, but also other government institutions involved in international cooperation. And it's a funny coincidence, it's true. I was one of the co-authors of the purpose of references for the scoping mission of this progress program. That was back in 2000. What? 12, 13, 14? Yeah, I was at that time deputy head of the Western Balkan division at SDC. We had a long-standing cooperation. I give maybe a short historical summary if you are interested in that. We had a long-standing cooperation, well, with scientific programs. One was called SCOPES. This was run by the Swiss, what's the National Foundation? The Swiss Foundation, right? So this was running for, I don't know, maybe 20 years, but not just focused on social sciences. And then you mentioned the famous RRPP. This was a mandate to the University of Fribourg, and this was a classical research promotion program, good in quality, but we were funding research. And under certain criteria, twinning between Swiss and Eastern European scientific institutes. And after probably 12 years, this is the range of the duration of the program funded by Switzerland. We are working in phases. Each phase has 4 years. And then after 3 years, we should kind of come to an end because every project has also an end. And then we were at that time thinking, okay, we should try to go beyond this, just strictly, you know, funding research projects. We wanted to strive for a more systemic approach, actually. And then, well, it was, the keywords were mentioned. I mean, it was about creating well, it was first focused on social sciences because we believe this would be important for fostering, promoting transition processes in the region. So one thing was fostering the research community as such, and then working on the interfaces between research and the political sphere. And we all know that these are different projects. I mean, these are two different worlds, and somehow bridges need to be built in order also for social sciences to become relevant for politics, let's say, at the end of the day. And I think the third dimension was rules and norms, the frame conditions. That was actually the enabling environment, and the whole thing was actually inspired by, this is funny, in the field of private sector development. There was an approach called making markets work for the poor, which is a systemic approach, and the whole reflection behind this performance was actually inspired by this systemic approach. And then we did this scoping mission that was kind of an attempt to do a political economy analysis. And we started then with Serbia and Albania, and we wanted to expand it to the whole region, actually over the years. And then, okay, it got somehow after the first phase, it got stopped. I have to admit, I don't know exactly why. I left in 2016. This is the rotational system we have. You do 4 years, and then, okay, I was then posted somewhere else. And by coincidence, somehow I was appointed head of cooperation in Serbia now 2 years ago, and I learned that it was, well, this performed in that system, you know. So there were many other things I didn't have a chance to really investigate the reasons for well, it was not stopped, it was not continued somehow. But as I said, normally programs would evolve over a longer time period than in this case. I'm surprised and happy to learn here that okay, it was at least not in vain. There are some encouraging results with the adhesion to this ESS. I was not aware of that. I think this ESS was not mentioned in the log frame somehow officially. But I mean, there is flexibility, of course. So you have to capitalize on opportunities, and this is a very nice surprise for me. Actually, I as you said, I was very much involved in this at the very beginning. I maybe followed up the 2 first years, and then I quit. And maybe a last word on SDC's engagement in research and science. So this well, scopes that I mentioned, RRPP and also performing, don't exist anymore. SDC stays committed in promoting research in sciences. It's under the label research for development. There are schemes in place where calls are launched periodically, and where there are possibilities to well access funding for certain purposes. What doesn't exist anymore is dedicated programs like regional programs like scopes, which was, well, that was not just Western Balkan, that was also including the Central Europe at the beginning. I mean, the new member states, plus also CIS. And then our RPP, this doesn't exist anymore. but still, these R4D programs, they are still there. And I still believe, I mean, having a look at the current situation in Serbia, I mean, it's probably more needed than ever that well, social sciences, political sciences, maybe in particular, would inform the political decision makers. Yeah. So that's what I can contribute. I'm happy to be here, happy to learn that there is some, that there is some perspective, let's say, to take this investment forward. And unfortunately, it didn't result in what we had intended. It should have become a regional program, starting, as I said, with Serbia, Albania, and then expanding over time to the other countries of the region, which unfortunately didn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, one of the ideas for when the Institute started to discuss the opportunity, and from our side, from HELVETAS, we also said, okay, let's look into those interventions which actually gave some results and had the positive outcome. The main idea was that Bern will document them, that it can then be also transferred as a good knowledge into other potential regions or countries. In that time when Perform was implemented, I still remember in a lot of forums or gatherings with young researchers, with researchers from social sciences, one of the requests on enabling environment was around the science fund or the agency for funding the science projects. We also had organized a study visit to the Swiss National Fund for certain exchanges. Some colleagues in that time from the ministry joined. And today there is also one change, that today in Serbia there is a science fund. With us it's Milica Đurić, director of the science fund. Thank you very much for joining. And I mean, what I can say as your observer who was involved in this project Perform, congratulations for the great work which Science Fund is doing in these last 2-3 years. Establishing the new institution, it's very difficult. I can say just working on a small project in one field of science, how difficult and challenging can be. Also, I always get a bit of an eye to monitor. Sometimes you share these percentages saying how much of the funds actually goes to social sciences. And these percentages are very good. If one wants to be objective, can say that in the time when Perform was implemented, we could only advocate for that. We could only say, okay, there should be a number of percentages. But please take the floor, and maybe you can tell us a bit more. Is the research infrastructure seen or are there on the discussion from the Science Fund?
Thank you, and thank you for introduction, and thank you for your kind words and observation. The Science Fund is a new government institution founded in 2019, and we are established through the special law on the Science Fund. We tried to build the institution as fast as possible because we were aware of the great expectations from the scientific community. Everybody in Serbia was anxious to see a new institution and to get new opportunities for funding their research. Of course, this was particularly challenged because of COVID in 2020. It started, and it was another complicated step for us to develop procedures, institutions, and programs through this kind of pandemic. But on the other hand, we really had a lot of help and assistance from the Government of Serbia, from the Ministry, from the World Bank, from EU, and particularly we had support from the scientific community. And because of that, we succeeded to now in 2022, we have 8 ongoing programs. And they're all thematic and built and designed differently because of the needs of the scientific community in Serbia and also national priorities. What is typical for our institution is that it is, while it is designed to fit scientific needs and the needs of researchers in Serbia, it is also designed to be as much as possible aligned with the good European practices. So we had tried to align our forms and procedure on primarily with the Horizon documentation and calls, which has two effects. One is that we try to establish the institution on the best possible practices, and second, we try to also push and support our researchers to also be competitive in the international calls. The second important pillar and the core of our institution is the objective evaluation of project proposals, which is based on the international peer reviewers and program board committee. Currently, we have contracts with more than 1,300 reviewers from more than 60 countries, and they all participate in selection of projects, and this is additional quality which we believe is added to our institution and to the procedures and processes. Of course, as we started with the first program until the 8th, we continuously tried to evolve, to listen to the needs and to try to improve the procedures and the programs. And we also listened to demands by the government and the trends that are needed for our country. So for the first program, we started with the open call, which was designed for all research areas, but it was designed for young researchers and postdocs as the special population of researchers with new ideas, energy, and also which was seen as the population which will be most adaptive to the new institution roles and criteria. Then, together with the government, we recognized the need for investing in artificial intelligence. And in parallel, while we were developing the institution, we had this very important feedback and assistance from our researchers in diaspora. We have amazing researchers all around the world, and we saw that there is potential and significance of designing new program which would help our researchers from Serbia and abroad to formally connect and to work on different research topics, to transfer technology, transfer methodology, knowledge, to work on this kind of collaboration through special program which is focused especially on mobility. Unfortunately, we had the bad luck with pandemic, which was particularly affecting traveling and mobility programs. So our researchers managed to shift some parts of collaboration in the hybrid mode or in online mode, and we prolonged those projects to be able to support travels and live visits to our researchers in diaspora. And this is very successful project, which we are now going to extend and design new program for collaboration with diaspora. In parallel, because of the pandemic and because of our great researchers, very ambitious, very motivated to contribute to the battle against the pandemic, we developed special program for COVID research. And first we thought it should be program designed for medical sciences, but then we understood that also other sciences are equally important and equally can contribute to the overall struggle of the entire population and entire country against the COVID. So within those 14 projects which are selected from COVID program, we also have projects from social sciences, particularly targeting the important aspects of economics, marginal groups, also very delicate questions which were raised in the COVID situation and which were not formally communicated or analyzed. And this is something supported through the World Bank program and project stage. Then within the special program for ideas, which is entitled for all research areas, we had 4 sub-programs, and one of them was designed for social and humanities, social sciences and humanities. We were particularly surprised, and we were very glad to hear from the reviewers and from the program board committee, which were all international researchers with very respective careers. They were very satisfied with the quality of projects in the sub-program for social sciences and humanities. And also, if you compare the ranking and the list, you can see that if you compare the numerical scores of the sub-programs, actually, there were many projects in social sciences which were ranked higher than those projects from other areas. Based on that, and based on the number of projects and very important topics submitted through our all open calls, we recognize that there is a need to design special program only for social sciences and humanities. And in 2022, we opened a new program called Identities, which is targeting only social sciences and humanities with the special aim to contribute first to analysis of different kinds of identities and problems and issues and aspects and potentials, but also to help us preserve everything which is actually civilizational heritage. And there are many topics very within this call, very deeply analyzed and carefully assembled. And now we are in the final phase of evaluation of program identities. So we're eager to see which will be the beneficiaries and the winners of this program. Until now, we supported 39 projects from social sciences and humanities among 282. And if we talk about the budget, 6.9 million euros are invested in those projects from social sciences and humanities. Majority of the budget is actually invested in researchers in their contribution to fee or salary, and also to employment of new young researchers. But also it is a significant budget allocated for purchasing equipment of for international travels, for publications. And also we see a lot of very, I don't know the number by heart, but we analyzed the results and we saw that there is a significant number of international publications in the top quality journals and published by very esteemed editors, publishers, publishing houses that are coming from those projects and programs and supported through the Science Fund. And now we also have program Prisma, which is closed recently. And from that, we also had around 30% of projects from social sciences and humanities out of 656 projects. So what I want to stress out is that we are aware of not only potential of the social sciences and humanities, but also motivation of the researchers and also the important experience they also have through different international programs and collaborations. We see it in the quality of project proposals and in the comments of the reviewers. And we are really proud to have also this kind of feedback and results from this part of scientific community. Currently, as we are approaching the deadline for evaluation of identities, and we are entering the evaluation of Prisma program, we are also very focused on the next phase of promotion of this kind of projects not only nationally, but also internationally, because it is a spectrum of very important topics which can create a special partnership, not only with diaspora researchers, but also many international institutions and researchers. And we see this as the next benefit and the next potential for further international collaboration between our institutions here from social and humanities, and social sciences and humanities, and researchers worldwide.
Thank you very much for this very, I would say, condensed presentation of the work of Science Fund. I believe that there will be more opportunities, especially now when the new projects are coming in terms of international cooperation. I would now like to go back a bit online. If I hope that our participants can still hear us, and I can only see Bernd, but I would now like to invite Bernhard Fabianek, our colleague and friend, if I can say, a big friend of social sciences, who is currently in Brussels. If I learn well, you are also planning soon to visit Belgrade, so I hope there will be opportunity also to visit colleagues here in the Institute of Social Sciences. Before I give you floor, thank you very much for the whole cooperation during the Perform project, also beyond Perform, I think in supporting and having a strong advocate in Brussels for the social scientists here from Western Balkans and from Serbia. That was very, very important.
Thank you very much, Nina. And good to see all the friends here with us, especially Martin, that just met when sort of I was really starting with the Western Balkans. It was one of the first meetings that I encountered him in Vienna. And of course, it was a great pleasure listening to the Swiss pleas for science cooperation and cooperating in an institutional framework. I was then also a bit reflecting about Bernd's slides about sticks and carrots and how we can get the Swiss to join the ESS. But this was more in the line of Nenad saying that you should start with a joke. But we're working on it. We're not forgetting this. No, thanks a lot, Bernd, also for the report. And I'm apologizing, we have to run away in 10 minutes. So I wanted also to listen what Victor has to say, because he was also quite often quoted in the report, just to see how this all comes nicely together. But yes, Nenad, we will probably in April, mid of April, come into town, and I'll try to bring some friends, especially Commissioner Maria Gabriel, and sort of bilateral science meeting. And it's good to see that there's a new Serbian government in place now, so we're working on that, and also there's a joint committee coming, and we hope that we can feature the ESS in that context. And that goes back to what Bernd was saying, how we can expand this, and also the Swiss colleagues across the region, and make this is on the one hand an example of, as was highlighted here, that scientific cooperation. You do this for your country, but then it's open data, it's open science. We have heard diaspora can access this data and it can do further research on that, but also to make it sustainable. And then we are back to evidence-based policy making that Bernd was sort of questioning, or seeing that the impact still needs a bit of time to come. But again, this is something that we are looking into. Okay, it's 2 rounds of ESS now, but let's say we have 5, 6 rounds of Serbia being part of the ESS. You see trends, you can derive things. So maybe it's a little bit too early for this, but the data is there, the data doesn't really lie. And also we have seen other examples in the Western Balkans of not so professional data gathering like the ESS has been doing, and how this has misfired in the press and has been misinterpreted. So really credits to the ESS for doing that properly and also consistently over such a long period. So thanks a lot for that. And that's also for us a quality seal and a guarantee that things are going well. And of course, we are happy to support. Now, Nenad will say, yes, nice words, where is the cash? So I'm trying my best. I haven't forgotten your email. We'll see what we can orchestrate. And really, this is, especially when we talk research infrastructure, pan-European cooperation, ESS, I'm tempted to say was an easy entry ticket, but was a sort of a way that really shows that you can cooperate. And again, Bernd has outlined it in his report, that it has follow-on effects, that you're becoming part of a larger community, and there further research collaboration opportunities arise from. And this is really important for us, and part of European research area integrating the Western Balkans. And yes, President von der Leyen is in the region these days. I wouldn't say that she's passing a research message, but certainly she's passing the message that the Western Balkans is part of Europe and that we work together, and especially North Macedonia, Albania being in the process of accession. And then we have had meetings last week, and again, research is the area where sort of first successes can be quickly achieved, also because we don't have so much of a bigger of a legal rucksack that we have to sort of go through. So therefore, again, ESS paving the way, showing that this can be done. Thanks a lot, and happy to follow up with you.
Thank you very much, and definitely you will hear more from us in terms of potential next steps, also from the side of HELVETAS together with partners. Now, I just want to check. I'm not sure is Victor with us. I cannot see him, but before I will also try to check via SMS. I would like to invite a colleague, Martin Witz. I feel a bit like in a Eurovision song context, because Martin is currently in Provence, so we are really covering different parts of Europe. Martin, thank you very much for taking time and joining us. Mr. Richard Coley also mentioned this MSD M4P approach, which was part of Perform project, and Martin, as a project manager, was bringing this approach first to the project team, if I can say, but also then in working with stakeholders. When Martin and I, in preparation for this event, exchange about this, he was also positively, if I can say, surprised about the event and some positive outcomes from Perform. So Martin, thank you for joining. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm a bit in a holiday mood, currently in a small village in the south of France, but very happy to join the group and to join this event. Before I start, just I wanted to recap with a few sentences again about Perform. Perform was a project that was initiated in early 2015, January 2015, and the main mandate of Perform was to facilitate a better collaboration between social science research and policymakers for more evidence-informed, evidence-based policies. That was one of the intentions. And we started in 2015, and as you can imagine, so starting was not so easy to find entry points, but we had a couple of very exciting working lines on bringing together social science research and policymakers. Collaboration with the Public Policy Secretariat was one important area, and different ministries, different social science research. So our main emphasis was not so much on a thematic field, but more on methods and mechanisms of bringing together social science research and policymakers. How to have social science research conducting research which is relevant to policy making and which can be taken up in policy making. And that was our main mandate. In early 2017, then Dragan Stojanovic approached us with the idea, can we help social science, the Institute of Social Science and the Faculty of Social Science to join the ESS. And it was, in fact, Ninat who was pushing it, and he was sort of really the lead person in Perform who was taking that forward. By 2017, Perform had developed already a fairly trustful relationship with the Ministry of Science, with the leadership in the Ministry of Science, the secretary in particular, who we were in sort of close talking terms in regular intervals. What we had, just to recap from that also what Bernd was saying, we had a couple of committed individuals, and Dragan was one of them, certainly, but from the project side, it was also Nenad and a few others, and the institutions behind, and perform as a facilitator, not as a doer. So, and here comes in sort of this MSD, M4P approach to say, we as a project did not have the role in doing things and paying for things fully, but more in facilitating different stakeholders, different actors coming together, entering a dialogue towards an agreed objective. And that was the situation. So we had this mix of committed individuals in the beginning and institutions behind them, and perform as a project that had funding to sort of to be able to talk with the ministry and say, okay, we can contribute to reduce possible risk, but we certainly want the ministry also to contribute paying for that. And we found a modality and for the ministry to agree to that. And then we had the process of ESS coming in, people being trained by ESS, enumerators being trained, etc. But the project was actually the facilitator making sure that things are sort of, there is a dialogue going on, there's a dialogue between the ministry and the social science faculty, but then also making sure that sort of agreements are kept, etc. So ensuring sort of this constant ongoing dialogue. And so I think it's interesting in terms of sort of from a development point of view, what's necessary for successful outcome. And that was, as I said, this group of individuals who were committed, institutions behind the project who could provide some co-funding, and then taking it forward. What else did I want to say here? Bernd used the word knowledge broker. That may apply, but sort of really our main role was that of a facilitator, in the sense of bringing different parties together, making sure they understand each other, making sure there's a common objective and outcome where everyone wants to agree. And I think that was important, and the study of Bernd is a good review and a good assessment to see actually what were the factors that led to the achieved outcomes. What I was also pleased, I mean, I've been out of Serbia since mid-2019, but what I was pleased that the outcomes which we had expected and also articulated and defined at the beginning actually were listed now by Bernd as those that were achieved. What I was a bit surprised about was sort of this explicit point of Bernd that ESS membership and the ESS survey was not intended to be used as for evidence-based policy making. I recall that differently from the discussion we had earlier, was that the ministry did expect results from the ESS to be used by government, ministries, government, to understand what are attitudes of people, what are changes in attitudes and opinions, etc. And that was considered something very important by the ministry to be contributed through the ESS into the government. And also that ministries take out research results and use them in their evidence informed policy making process. Maybe that has changed, but in the beginning, that was certainly a topic that was upfront also. Yeah, I mean, Perform lasted for just 4 years. It was a complex arena, and I think we negotiated well. And apart from the ESS, we had a couple of other interesting success stories. But then it came to an end for apparently not enough money or whatever. But it requires more time actually to facilitate that change and to actually achieve the objective which Perform had in the beginning, and to take the learnings and experience from Serbia and also Albania into other countries, which was intended initially. Yeah, so much from my side.
Thank you very much, Martin. And now for I would give the floor to Bernd in the end also to close and maybe respond to this if Bernd you want. But before that, I would just like to invite Jovana Zafirovic, who is a researcher at the Institute of Social Sciences. I can say started as a young researcher, maybe now close to mid-career. I don't want to comment on that because it can always be tricky. But basically, I guess from you in a few minutes we can hear a bit of the benefits for researcher and for the research career path. I would say how much the importance of joining the research infrastructure is there. Also, I would like everyone else to be very, I would say, quick, short in time, because I know that there are other events after this one coming, and that some of the colleagues need to join other events as well. So, Jovana, please.
Thank you, Nada. I'm going to be quick. So thank you. First of all, thank you all for coming here. I'm really glad to be here and to meet all of you, especially because you are one of the people who made ESS in Serbia a reality. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank my other colleagues who were team members of ESS who worked relentlessly for this to happen. As we have already said, ESS is really important for the research community in Serbia, but also to help to position Serbia in the European research landscape. But I also have to highlight that having high quality methodological data is especially important for students. So for master's students, for PhD students, for early career researchers, who are also make up, I guess, a lot of the users of ESS. I actually have seen that according to the impact study of the European Social Survey published this year, proportion of downloaders is the highest among students and academic users, including PhD students. And the rate of students using ESS data is only increasing. So that can pinpoint basically how important for ESS data is for students. During my own studies, I participated in several statistical courses, but since Serbia wasn't part of the ESS, we had to use other countries to analyze. So you can imagine the joy, the feeling of joy we had when Serbia actually became the member of ESS, and we could actually analyze data related to the Serbian population and compare. And actually, most importantly, through participation in these 2 rounds, we have managed, so me and other young researchers that are sitting also here, some of them, we have learned how to conceptualize, organize, participate and carry out, like Bernd had mentioned, large-scale surveys. And this experience, this fieldwork experience, also helped us understand what goes behind the scenes. How can we get this high-quality data, and also we can use this experience to apply for different projects and to lead our own projects in the future, etc. And moreover, this participation had led to numerous scientific publications. Me and other of my younger colleagues actually also had papers published by using ESS data, And because of the quality of ESS data, these papers, these publications hold more scientific weight and significance. So for the end, I just have to say that my PhD thesis is also mostly based on ESS data. So without ESS, there will be no PhD in my PhD. So thank you all, and thank you all for coming. So that's it.
Thank you, Jona, very much. Before I give the floor to Bernd again, I just want to check among those who are online if there are colleagues who would like to contribute to the discussion or take the floor. Okay, I guess not. Is there any contribution from here from those who left until now? Okay, I don't see any sense. So Bernd, the floor is yours as a concluding remark. If also as I know, you will soon be in Belgrade, probably next year, so there might be opportunity to join some of other events here at the Institute of Social Sciences. So Bernd, thank you one more time very much for doing the study and for the great presentation.
Thank you, Nenad, and I don't want to take much of your time because I'm conscious of time and that you have another event coming up. Just very briefly, maybe three things. It was really interesting to hear and to see a bit of the broader picture and look beyond the ESS itself and like get feedback from the broader science community, also from the National Science Fund, which was certainly interesting, also bringing in this aspect of diaspora. It was very encouraging to just hear the last statement from the social scientists themselves and to again hear how good these benefits are from the ESS for the whole research community. I was also glad to hear from the European Commission that they will continue with their efforts. They will come back to Belgrade and continue to facilitate and maintain the dialogue regarding research and European cooperation. That's exactly what I was hinting at with the continued engagement of the international community, be it the EC, be it donor agencies like SDC, or international NGOs like HELVETAS and the Perform project. Maybe just a quick reaction to what Martin said regarding evidence-based policy making. As I said in my presentation, there were lots of different perceptions about this and whether it has really contributed to evidence-based policy making. I also mentioned in my presentation that it's hard to say after this brief research or give an informed opinion about this. My impression was that it was not the state's main motivation to join the ESS to improve policy making, not the first and foremost priority. But obviously there were different motivations among different state actors. But I would be happy to come back to Belgrade and dig deeper and do another piece of research. Up to you. And just finally, maybe I would just like to come back to what I also mentioned in the last slide and which was not really discussed now in this setting, the question of institutionalizing the support for the ESS, or maybe I didn't hear it from the discussion, that I think it's really important to secure this success in and keep those benefits also in future, to have a solid institutional basis, a foundation for ESS in Serbia, bringing institutions on board, having a formalized agreement so that this is going to continue in future. And I think that's really important from what we heard from the discussion right now. That's it from my side. I would like to thank you a lot for the interesting remarks and contributions, and looking forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Bernd, and it was a real pleasure to have you here. And I guess that there will be more opportunities that you are back to Belgrade and that the similar work to this one will be done. I want to thank you to all of the colleagues who contributed, to those who were online, and thank you all who were here in person, face to face. One more time, good luck to the Institute on celebrating the 65th anniversary with all of the changes. Good luck in the future. I know that there is a, how to say, important conferences are coming. This one was important, but now in the afternoon there will be one in the Serbian Academy of Science. We, from the side of HELVETAS, are, so to say, present here in Serbia as a partners, and we will be happy to cooperate with the institute and with the other stakeholders. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon, if I can say. Yes.